Welcome to the Solar Coaster, a renewable energy themed talk show right here in lovely Maui County. Aloha and Happy New Year, and welcome to the Solar Coaster CES live show here with Jason Vercard calling in from, where the heck are you, Jay?
Still in Osaka, but this is a great day, isn't it? Get the solar coaster back on the tracks and checking out all the crazy stuff at CES 2022. I'm floored by the amount of announcements that we're going through.
Yeah, there's some great stuff out there. And so, yeah, we haven't done a show in quite a bit. Of course, for those of you that are listening on podcast and audio, we haven't posted a show, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say, in about a year. And well, what were we doing during that time period? Well, we were a variety of things, but we did get involved with a cross-country film project with Solar Power International, now RE Plus, and did 6 core videos around solar, hydrogen, microgrid, wind, EV, and energy storage. And that was quite a bit of an experience. We built out our studios and learned all about filmmaking and audio, and made lots of wonderful mistakes, and had a raucous time across the country in an RV. Well, maybe we'll throw some of that up on our backgrounds later so you can see it. But because it's CES right now, I got in touch with Jason, and I was like, hey man, I think I might go to Vegas. And then very quickly it was, I think I'm not going to Vegas. So let's do some stuff remote. And Jay's like, great. And actually it's not bad. We're so used to it these days. And we have so much content out there through the virtual platforms, right? So we can get all the B-roll, we can read all the news, and then we can actually, you can actually touch base with people. Like I'm connecting, I probably get, when you register for media, by the way, you get approached by all the PR people, leading up to the show, and no one knows if they're going to be there virtually or for real, in this kind of a time. And you might get 20 emails and approaches a day for like the 10 days prior. There's 2,200 exhibitors, typically, usually around a couple 100,000 people. I think this year, because of Omicron, I think we're looking at maybe around 70,000 attendees. I haven't seen the numbers. Those were the estimates. I don't know what the exhibitor count is. I have seen Gary Shapiro, the CTA lead. I think he's the president and CEO of CTA, the organization that runs CES, talking about how this is a great year for small companies because a lot of the big companies aren't there right now. Of course, they did their keynotes, but people, the emerging companies can kind of steal the show in a sense, right? So we're going to get a chance to look at some of these guys that we want to see, the ones from the energy sector. Right
there about small companies being able to steal. I think that's contributing to the sheer volume of noise we've got to sift through this week.
There's a lot out there, and we got to bear in mind that even prior to the discussion about this show being virtual or this show being physical or the big companies pulling out or any of that stuff, we were all really looking forward to getting to one of these shows again. But there was dialogue about a huge increase in square footage at CES this year. Now, bear in mind, CES has always been the largest event annually. I've talked to the hoteliers, I've talked to the restaurant people during that time of year, and they're like, man, this is the show that hits in January that makes our year right out of the gate. So obviously it's a little bit different this year, but if we think about the language that we heard earlier on, they were moving from like 1 million square foot of coverage, I'm just guessing on those numbers, to like 1.4. They were really trying to expand. And I think that a lot of that expansion is in the space of autonomous vehicles. I mean, those things take up space, right? Air mobility, all the really cool stuff from the energy sector that we're excited to kind of like, dig into. So I think a lot of it is sustainability, a lot of it is ag, a lot of it is, really exciting things in sustainability is probably the moniker that could probably hold it all together. But there's energy, there's autonomous vehicles, there's agriculture, there's so much in that, right? There's IoT, there's smart home, there's EV charging, there's oh man, it's just a deluge of tech.
Yeah, and that's the reason why they need the square footage, because when you're talking, well, ag traditionally wasn't, I mean, where do they fit at a consumer electronics show? Originally, it really wasn't their thing. They had their own trade show circuit, and they didn't show up. But now they're basically building giant robots for agriculture and farming.
They sure are.
And they belong at this festival, they belong at the show, but they're very, very large. So they're gonna need the space. Same thing with smart homes. You want to do a smart home demonstration. You kind of bring a little like a tiny home container with you, but again, that's not small. So they need all these footprints. Absolutely.
So let's we're gonna basically take an opportunity here to one, we're just stoked to be back talking solar coaster. It's 2022. We've been in the solar coaster world, has been up and running since 2017, I think, maybe. I don't know. We've been doing this for a while now, Jay. But
I'll let you keep track of it. Numbering the shows was always your thing.
Yes. Yes.
Just to be clear, like we never really went away. We had other responsibilities and jobs and video projects and things going on. But Mr. Porter and I talk to each other at least once a week. About this, check out this cool thing that just dropped.
Sure, but not as much as when we had the radio show every week, right? Because then it was always like boom, 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 stacking it up. Now I think I'm excited to kind of get back into that because there's so much to keep track of. There's so much to keep track of. In the past, I had been to CES. This was a point of contention, I think, for Jay, but I went there by myself, right? Was that 2020, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, the feeling I had, Jay, and this is something I wanted to bring up, is that, it's almost like the trade shows that we cut our teeth on, Intersolar, which by the way is only a couple weeks away in January in Long Beach, and then Solar Power International, where we did this project over the summer which is now RE Plus and the new moniker. And when we think about those shows, I tend to think of those as kind of like those are the ones that are covering the energy, the foundational kind of energy, whether it's wind or solar, mostly solar, of course, resi, utility, commercial, all that foundational kind of infrastructure and support to be able to allow us to do really cool stuff. And then when I made that leap over to CES and I saw some of the same companies, I remember seeing like LG, Robert Mundos came over and he was like, "Hey, where's Jay?" Right on the floor in Vegas. I'm serious, man. And so it was, there's a lot of the same companies, but there's more of, and I'll use this term, kind of borrowing this term from Brian Patterson of Emerge Alliance. He calls it the killer apps. Right? He likes to talk about the parallels in energy and telephony is the term he uses, right? And the killer apps, look at this, Indianapolis 500, autonomous Indianapolis, right? This kind of stuff, okay? When you have abundant electrons, what do you do with those electrons? Well, CES is going to tell you what you do with those electrons, man. And what you do is some really fun, and I want to say the word shit. Can I say shit? We're not on air anymore on radio. I know you're a little more proper than me, Jay, but I want to say that I really want to be able to, 2022, not be so kind of locked into the old rules that we had. The bottom line is it's amazing stuff, right? It's amazing technology, from air mobility to ag to these are the killer apps. These are the things that we take all those electrons, we put them to good use. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to scrape through there and pull out some of the, just cherry pick some of the cool things. What are some of the ones you're excited about?
The absolute gems of the show. Because we're in the energy space, you sent this to me. GAF is a huge roofing outfit. They have thousands of subcontractors across the nation, really, really well known. If you Google just GAF, I expected to get somebody's the definition of the word, but it's actually the first hit on Google is this company. They are now branching into energy and actually manufacturing their own. And this is great. Nailable. Yes, I said nailable, like put nails through it. solar roof product. And it's based off of shingles. They're building it as a shingle. It actually doesn't look like a shingle to me, and I'm trying to get the data sheets right now. There's not a lot of information, but when you check this thing out, it is built around the standard model of roofing. So it's going to be, instead of the Tesla model of they need to do a special way, all the interconnects and everything need to fit. It looks like it's a much more installable product, if I can say that, with a lot less interconnects, and but still following a standard model that your regular roofer can just get on the roof and do it. One man
Yes.
carries lightweight shingles and be able to put up a solar roof from a
Okay.
reputable
So
roofer.
this is really exciting, and I don't think you've had a chance to see this because Jay hasn't necessarily seen all of the draft videos that we made this past summer, but one of the interviews that we did for the solar vertical, right, was with the Rising Sun guys, Jyoti Mangat, out here pioneering really the deployment of the Tesla solar roof, which is, by the way, V4 at the moment, a Tesla solar glass.
Yep.
And he talked a lot about the complexities and the challenges and with that particular model, right? And we have this beautiful imagery. It's amazing, but it's so when the GAF guys were on my radar this summer, right? And this is apparently it's like a billionaire family, and they're in charge of this amazing company, and it looks like an alternative approach to BIPV, which is really the holy grail, I think is the term I used in the videos for this, the holy grail of building integrated photovoltaics is really the solar roof. That's like the ultimate one, right? Because there's lots of different BIPV stuff out there, but the solar roof, their opportunity there is pretty exciting. I mean, that's the thing where you can go after the housing starts. That's the thing where you can go after all the new builds. We are still in a housing crisis, right? So there's going to be lots of new houses going to need to be built, and if they can be built with solar roofs rather than traditional roofs, and then later on down the road come in and put panels on, if they can be done in a way that is not let's say onerous and complex and too complicated to make it profitable for the companies involved, if roofing companies can do it, and that's where the Nailable, I love the way that they said that it's a nailable solar roof, because they're saying existing roofing companies can do this. That's what they're saying.
Yep. Yeah,
that's everything.
That was precisely the point, is that if you can do this, I mean, that was part of Musk's original presentation for the Tesla roof, was that it's not going to cost any more than just getting your roof done. So if you are doing new construction, or if you are re-roofing your house, it makes it makes no sense not to do it.
Yeah. By the way, in the new way, we're making drinks in the middle of the show, Jay. So that's how it goes.
Is that how this is going? Okay.
Yes, that's how it's going. Because I
you
just
do realize it's 11:20 in the morning for me. So
I'm not trying to encourage you to drink at 11:20 in the morning, but I'm going to drink at 11:20 Osaka time, which is 4:19 Maui time.
You're fine. I'll let you go. You got to pass.
Thank you.
So the next thing I want to talk about really quick is that Samsung remote, the one without any batteries in it. How does that work?
Yeah. Are there no batteries, or are they just not replaceable? There's a battery.
Okay, yeah, it's actually very unclear right now. It says no batteries, or it doesn't take any batteries. What they're talking about is like typical double AAA batteries that you have to always replace.
And there's no USB charger for it. For example,
actually don't work that well in that use case, because the remotes themselves are so low power that they'll drain the battery all the way to zero, and that works great for your old batteries, which you want to use every single last electron you can squeeze out of them, but because you're gonna bin it. But if it's a rechargeable, they actually don't like going to zero. I've told you this before, is you don't want to drain your phone to 0% because you're actually damaging the battery. And they've since put charge controllers and firmware in there to make sure that you don't do that. But it could just be a larger than average capacitor in there that's doing things. But the most interesting thing is there's a solar cell embedded in it. I don't really like the location. Remember, we used to have solar calculators, and they had the little solar panel right up at the top, and that worked. But the solar panel on this remote is actually on the bottom, so you have to turn your remote upside down. Who does that? I don't think it's actually not gonna work that well. But the most interesting tech is RF energy harvesting, so stray RF noise that's out there.
So it's not coming from a source. It's all around.
It's not coming from a source. It's like your Wi-Fi. Yes, your Wi-Fi or the 5G or whatever else is around in your neighborhood.
But it's probably not discriminate,
floating
right?
through the air. It doesn't have. Yeah, it's not like a regular inductive. You have to set up the little power thing, and it's radiating you in your living room all the time. It's literally just what you would consider ambient, the stuff that's already in the air around your house. That's what it's harvesting. And that's really cool, because
there's some guys that wear copper pants to avoid that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Don't keep your cell phone in your pocket. But that type of stuff, you're talking about relatively low power devices, and we're getting more low power all the time. In my brief time going back into electronics, it's gone from 5 volt to 3 volt to 1.8 volt. They just keep stepping down in the necessary voltages and currents to run these little microprocessors. But things like, for example, sensors for your smart home, whether it's room occupancy or alarm related, whatever it is, you might not need wiring at all for anything.
So this is the area when once again, I think I'm going to immediately go back and reference the same person, Brian Patterson, Emerge Alliance, right? Yeah. So we're talking about hybridization of the grid, DC, AC. We're talking about, remember that phrase he used that we fell in love with? The, was it the flourishing garden of smart home devices and, or IoT devices in your home. And that notion of all of this technology needs to be powered one way or the other. And in order to be able to take advantage of this, and there's things that, are obvious to us. And a remote is probably the most obvious because one of the first things we got, right? But that remote, and this may not sound sexy to people, remote, whatever, it's powered by Wi-Fi, who cares? But when we think about it, we think, whoa, what else can it power? And, and then you're not, replacing batteries or the real costs of like, for example, what Troy goes through at Pantech and Crestron and Adapt Energy and all those cool, that amazing suite of companies with Sony, those guys are doing really radical high-end smart homes, right? But there's a lot of wiring involved in that, right? A lot of that technology, whether it's the Lutron shades or whether it's the, the unbelievable different types of tech that it handles. Can you power these things, all these different devices? And believe me, folks, there are like hundreds coming, right? From sensors and water sensors to, to temperature related things, to battery related things, to your hot tub could have 3 or 4 different sensors in it, right? Like, so could we start to harvest energy and power those devices through different mechanisms like this? And that's what I think is really interesting to see. I love the idea of, of course, we've always had those solar powered calculators, right? That was kind of one of the first examples of that. Mm-hmm. Or the kinetic watches.
The interesting thing to me is that RF harvesting. The little solar panels have been around. They work in specific use cases. And this RF harvesting thing is the same way. When you talk about the shades, the electric shades, those are never going to be powered by RF harvesting. The motor requires too much energy to move those shades up and down. But the sensor that will detect whether the shades need to move up and down, if it's just a light sensor somewhere, it doesn't, how often does it need to report? Once every 30 minutes, once every hour? It has plenty of time to sit there and build up a little current, activate it, take a reading from the sensor, send off a data packet that says it's now kind of bright in here. It's 4:30 in the afternoon and the sun's blazing in. We want to close the shades. And then the system takes action. And the same with like alarm sensors, it doesn't have to do anything unless there's an event. So it can always just sit there and be fully charged, ready. And then if, heaven forbid, someone starts breaking into your home, the sensor alerts and somebody, and everybody can have these things. And you don't have to go around changing. They do exist that you have wireless sensors, but you have to go around and replace the batteries every 6 months or whatever it is. It's an absolute nightmare. That's the core and nobody ever does that.
It's almost like it's a stopgap to being able to really have, very meaningful smart home equipment. A lot of this stuff is kind of like, oh, that's neat, let's try it out. It may not be that meaningful to you, right? And since we started this discussion, I've definitely delved into the world of lighting. And I've got a whole bunch of lighting around the property. I've got it hooked up to the phone. I can turn it on. I can set schedules. I'm too lazy. I never even set it and maximize its full potential. But it is pretty. It's a nice tool to have. You go, oh, this is something I like. And I have like a little hot tub out back, and I just put these colored lights that allow me to kind of walk out without tripping over the stones, right? And that's actually valuable to me. So it's like, we're going to see more and more of this tech. I'm excited about the sensors primarily, and maybe the sensors are an area that can really benefit from alternative power source, because like you just said, they're standby and they don't require necessarily huge kind of power or a lot of power over time. So that's very cool, man. Do you think that Samsung is kind of trying to say something with this? Because the remote is just it's like You think they're saying, hey, we're going to be doing more of this in the future?
Well, it's okay. So the RF harvesting technology is relatively new. They're still working on efficiencies and how to make it actually work. But I can see a future, and I'm going to name drop only because they were really close to me when I was growing up, like Anderson Window and Door, and they're going to be fielding windows that come pre-equipped. I mean, you don't have to bother with sensors. You know, they're already built into the window frame.
Becomes a standard feature set.
It's just going to be a standard feature in newer, smarter homes.
Yeah. Radical, man. Radical. I had something else I wanted to say, but let's jump on to something else.
That's a weird futurist thing. I'm sorry.
No. The thing I wanted to ask about actually was, you remember the choo-choo train from CES 2020 that was powered, the little train? Was that the same technology? Do you remember? I can't remember. I think it was.
I thought that was inductive.
We'll have to look back on it because we have that in one of our shows. And that was there was this fella, his name will come up. He was like Yuri or something. He was a neat guy, and he was the CEO of this small company. And he had a little choo-choo train that was going around in circles. And he's like, "Look, no wires. It's powered by that." And I was wondering if it was the same technology. So
powered by that, meaning the inductive beam. I mean, that's like the wireless for your.
I see. I was just hoping for Yuri that he got bought by Samsung and made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So.
Inductive charging.
All right. Well,
finally, we got to talk a little bit. I'm gonna jump right in on this one. We got to talk a little bit about EVs because apparently, everybody has one.
Yeah. Which one do you want to talk about? Because that's the thing.
Well, let's talk right away. Let's talk about Sony. Sony's a company, making automobiles, right? And that's a thing.
Yeah.
No,
of course.
No. Okay. Sony has just announced that they're going to form a new company, Sony Mobility Inc. It's in process right now. Probably the end of Q1, early Q2. You're going to see them starting out, and they have a couple different models. But the Vision S2 SUV is the one that they just showed off today. This really speaks to the cross-pollination in all these industries. You go to see something like CES, and they traditionally you'd have companies that operate in a certain space, and that's it. But what now, anybody can do anything. All the automakers are talking about software. I was watching the GM presentation, and he mentioned Linux and their proprietary platform that anybody can develop for, and I'm going to download it and try it. But anybody can develop for twice in the presentation, because they want to make it very clear that these vehicles are no longer static. Like, you used to be able to buy a vehicle and you knew what its 0 to 60 time is. Well, now they're saying that we can change that, and they can because it's all in software.
Well, what's exciting here to me is that everybody's making an EV. Mm-hmm. And that probably goes back to some of these companies on the foundational level of the tech that really maybe have huge capital to throw into it, and they can maybe they create one of the companies, REE, I noticed that they and there was an Israeli startup recently, and then they're blowing up, of course, and they have this kind of skateboard that allows other companies to create their own EVs over that platform, right? Yep. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of companies move in that space. But a company like Sony obviously has the resources to do some meaningful things and distinguish themselves in the space, right? So what are the technologies that Sony might bring to bear that will be distinct from Tesla or Mercedes or the other guys with the big capital, right? Or GM. Of course, we're going to talk about, the major keynotes. It's probably half dozen or a dozen big keynotes at CES this year. And a lot of them are talking about the full ecosystem, whether it's hardware, whether it's software, whether it's, how they go about producing these things, the supply chains, how they control their supply chains, the batteries, everything, right? All of the different things that are out there. But like Sony, that's a company that's got moxie, right? A lot of muscle. And what are the things that a company like Sony might focus on by making something that's distinct? And that's the type of stuff that I get excited about when I look at these EVs. We've been driving, we've had a chance since 5 years ago. We went out to San Francisco to figure out what was going on with EVs, and we drove around in an RV then, right? And we got in the Bolt, and we got in the X, and we got in the S, and it was like, wow, these are awesome. That was the main thing, was like, wow, these are amazing.
It was a totally new experience at the time.
That was only 5 years ago, Jay. It's not like that was 100 years ago. That was 5 years ago. And now what are we looking at? Everyone's building like these unreal machines with all these capabilities, right? So right now in the Tesla sphere, you have the Model S Plaid with the yoke, right? They have like a 1.9 or under 2 seconds, 0 to 60. They have a world record on the quarter mile. They just are on Jay Leno's garage thing and that show, right? And they're blowing past everything. So we've kind of like, everyone's come to the place where we know that these EVs are dominant in performance for the most part. They're just dominant. And then when you get in them, now all these new I'm going to say accoutrement, all these new wonderful little, experiences can be had inside of them. I'm seeing companies like, and this is even the last couple of years at CES, I'm seeing companies like Toyota Boshoku, right? That's I think the original Toyota company, and they were focusing on textiles, and that was 100 years ago or whatever, right? And what does Toyota bring to the space if they're going to move from the hydrogen to the EVs? But regardless, these new suite of cars where it's no longer just, it's almost like the phone. It's like everyone makes a phone, and then who's going to be dominant? Who's going to create these new value propositions within that space? Now it's like the car is like the big platform, and guys like Sony are coming out, and they've got the prowess to do things. I mean, GM, Sam, everybody's going to be doing it, man.
I certainly follow a lot of what Sony does. I have tremendous respect for their hardware engineers. I'm a little concerned about their software.
Yeah, no kidding.
If I can be totally honest.
Yeah, you sound like me talking about Ford.
A little bit.
I'm a little concerned about their software.
But that's kind of what I was saying, is that all these things are now software definable. Your 0 to 60 time is not limited by the size of your carburetor intake. It's limited by the software that keeps all the torque from going to the motor, and it ramps up so that you don't immediately get that ludicrous speed acceleration. That was part of the GM presentation as well, is that you can load a profile, and your teenager is going to love this, but you can load the teenager profile that will slow you down.
I loved it. They said, you're in a school zone, we're going to limit the capacity of the car.
Automatically limit the car. Yeah.
that really presents, I think, a vision, or at least a sense of where this goes beyond simply being dominant in performance, dominant in acceleration, dominant in in handling, or whatever the characteristics are. I mean, I got a chance, by the way, I think we talked about this briefly. I got a chance to sit in the Porsche Taycan. And I was excited here in Maui, and I was excited about the prospect of that Taycan maybe having like a more car-like interior in contrast with the Tesla. I didn't really feel like it did, though. I mean, it did a nice job with design, but it didn't feel like the Porsches that I know, right? So it's like, I would think that Porsche would throw their weight behind the interior and the luxurious feel, right? But so who knows? I mean, companies like Sony, they're probably going to focus in on some of their real strong core skill sets and value proposition, things they can do well. You said you're concerned about the software. GM,
they've had issues over the years, but I think it's mostly because of the sectors that they operate in. They operate in entertainment, and entertainment is dominated by this war between the content providers and the content pirates, if I can say that. And so their system security is constantly being circumvented. They do have issues, and mark my words, the day is coming where someone is going to hack somebody else's vehicle, and something is going to happen, and it's going to cause some seismic shifts through the industry. GM's presentation, like I said, they mentioned Linux specifically twice, which I think is great. I recently did my own switch. Is
that a good thing or not good thing from Jay's perspective?
It can be. Nothing is completely secure, and the illusion of that security is what keeps us all happy. But I think that there's going to need to be some serious focus. They keep talking about being connected all the time, being on the low latency. Sony said low latency 5G is coming in all their vehicles. They focused a lot on their entertainment side. You're going to be entertained in your vehicle all the time. Well, shouldn't you be paying attention to the road? But but they're going to be all be connected to each other. And if they're all connected to each other, well, anybody can get in the middle of that connection and do things. And if you had you're going to have bad actors. So how do they circumvent that? How do they stop that?
Well, we'll find out which companies are strong in
the
that.
security
Which,
is, as always, security. And so it's just like for the smart home stuff, I'm always a big proponent of security processes, additional securities. You talk about, we're now talking about lethal weapons vehicles.
we are now talking about
we are now talking about lethal.
It's no longer
weapons.
like,
and
you can't do your Excel spreadsheet. Now it's like
something. No, you can literally start up a bunch of vehicles in a parking lot somewhere and drive them all through the mall at high speed. You could do that if you could do that.
Along those lines, Jay, like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but along those lines, a moment ago in my background, we saw the Indianapolis 500 autonomous Indianapolis 500, right?
Yep.
And they have an event on the 7th, which is only 2 days away. They're actually, bringing these remarkable machines to the Speedway, the Indianapolis Speedway, and they're going to be competing, as I understand it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a very high consequence space. Of course, there are no people in those vehicles, right?
Yep.
But this is a great testing ground for that type of technology. So, I'm excited to see.
It absolutely needs to happen. This is what we did in robotics before, is that it's a speed challenge, and you literally have to build the fastest robot that will go through a course. There's no difference whether it's a little maze in a lab somewhere or the Monte Carlo track. It doesn't really matter. But it's going to be fun to watch for sure, and these guys are going to be going at a good clip. They're going to be able to do things with those vehicles that, and I hesitate to say it, but the human pilots probably would never be able to achieve. And
sure.
that's going to be really, really, really fun to watch. And that's where innovation happens. They're not limited to all the technical constraints of keeping a human being alive and or safe. They're gonna be able to do a lot of other stuff. They're gonna be able to reduce weight a whole lot. Like I said, it's gonna be really interesting to see what kind of technology comes out of those events.
Okay, so let's put a placeholder in the world of EVs, because it's so big. Right.
Yes.
And when we say EV, we may be thinking, oh, well, passenger cars. But if in the solar coaster world, EVs include electric vehicles, the electrification of transportation, include, ships and transpo and shipping.
We're talking
cargo, semi trail and locomotives and maritime and aviation and last mile delivery. So we just constantly think in that arc of the entire movement, electrification of movable devices kind of world. But even within just EV alone, like passenger vehicles, there's probably a dozen things we're going to want to talk about, from the Fisker Ocean and from Sony and a bunch of other guys that are out there.
It's Interspace, which doesn't have any controls at all.
Interspace, the Caddy, the super pimpin' Caddy. Yes, right. The Silverado.
From the outside, I swear it still has like a Diablo-esque. It looks like a Lamborghini silhouette, but inside it's like a living room with a big TV.
Yes, but it's like it's still got that, beefy Caddy kind of thing. It's like if you were to take a Lambo and put it up about 1.5 feet off the ground, it's kind of like that, right? Yeah. So, but anyway, there's plenty to talk about with EVs, and we'll probably cover those in subsequent shows, timing allowed for that. But we are going to be able to touch base on some of these other aspects of the energy technologies that are interesting out there. We did find that, why don't we just touch base briefly on split volt. Remember split volt? We saw those guys, I want to say 2 years ago at these shows. And it was kind of cool because what this company is doing, and I haven't seen a lot of news about new technology with split volt, but I do want to bring it up because this is a tech that allows you, as opposed to putting in an EV charger, you're able to effectively take your existing or new, I'd say, electrical behind the EV charger. You're able to use the electrical that's in place for your dryer to switch it over to your EV. And that's the thing where you can save a lot of money, because I don't know if you've had the lovely experience of hiring electricians recently, but they tend to be pretty expensive. And when you get them in there to do something, they're like, that thing right there that you bought for $500, it's going to cost you whatever, a G to put it in, right? So it's like, in this case, you might be able to save some of that money with a company like Splitvolt.
To a lot of regulations. When you're talking, you're talking 3-phase electric, you're talking metal conduit. They have to do a lot of work to put that in. I don't fault them at all for having to charge.
I'm not saying it's not legitimate. I'm just saying it's a real cost.
Of ripping walls apart and installing conduit and running cable and all the things, and then you have to understand how not to cook yourself in the process. So
there's a reason they call them Sparkies, and so the Sparkies tend to cost a lot of money. Splitvolt has an opportunity here to save you some money. Splitvolt's a neat company, and I think that finding ways to save money on the deployment of the new tech is an area that I'm always going to be excited to see. Right? It's like you've already invested. Like, if you go out and buy an EV right now, if you can get one, you've already invested tens of thousands of dollars in a new car, and you've kind of psychologically sunk down your money and your belief in the sense that this thing is going to work for me over the next decade or whatever, or 5 years, and it's going to pay off. It's going to be a beneficial decision. But in the case of then all of a sudden you get it home and you're like, I can't charge it on my regular outlet, right? What am I going to do? How do I get a reasonable charge rate out of this?
But it is abhorrently slow.
Yes, that would be tough.
Yeah. So this is one way to address that. The other thing is, if you're going in and you're actually going for EVs, maybe you have solar, or you're thinking about solar, you're thinking about that solar roof, you're going to have to go and reevaluate the entire electrical system of the home. Generally talking about replacing panels, cable, wiring. But the span system, we talked about span previously as well. Yep. They just announced that they have a new panel, 33% smaller than the previous version, and they have their own high-speed charger that can come with that as well.
The drive. Yep.
Yeah, the drive. So there's a lot of options. Like, when we were talking about this stuff even 2 years ago, you really didn't have very many options at all. DC fast charging was not something that was easy to do in your house. Now we're spoiled for choice.
Well, SPAN is a great talking point, because we've had some communication with SPAN here in Maui, and they were they were donating some of their Gen 1s to the community in Maui. I was able to get one of those. I haven't installed it yet. And a couple of my friends as well, right? And so these Gen 1s, they were like, okay, well, they maybe have a $5,000 MSRP, okay? But the actual install costs were between like 2 and 3 G's on average to install those systems, just like we were just talking about, right?
Yep.
So, but a very, very attractive tech. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at SPAN, and I'll take this moment to say there are other companies out there doing the same thing. And I'll call out, of course, Troy Morgan, with Adapt Energy and their panel. And that is a really remarkable technology. I think it warrants a look anytime you're buying a smart load control panel. And of course, there's SPAN. These guys are Tesla exits. They previous Tesla engineers. And then, of course, there's Lumen. Remember the Lumen guys, Alexander from the Southeast. So these are smart panel. These basically go in and replace your electric load center, your panel.
Everybody knows where their panel is, the breakers. That's what we're talking about.
Power went out. What do we do?
My point is that if you're going and like you're going to put solar on your home, or you have to put in new circuits to support an EV, you may end up having to replace the panel anyway, or make it larger, whatever it is.
Upgrade.
If you're going to do that, take a serious look at smart panels, because you're already going to be paying a large amount of money to replace that panel.
A great point.
Why would you replace it with good old bus bars when you can actually get all the additional features for not much more?
It's a great point. And so you just mentioned, first of all, you mentioned if you're going to have to upgrade your panel. Very rarely do we have to do that in the solar days, but I can see that happening more and more with the introduction of the EV equation, right? Mm-hmm. So now you've got solar, you've got typically batteries in a lot of the environments like Hawaii, and certainly in California and across the country. It's becoming popular. I bet it's becoming popular in Texas after their event, a year ago. So you have solar, you have batteries, now you have EVs. Now, maybe you need an upgraded panel. Maybe you need an upgraded overall amount of amperage. Who knows? You may be in that situation. When you do that, well, what is a smart panel? What does it do for you? It actually is game changing, because no longer are you sitting there saying to yourself, all right, my battery, let's say you've got a 10 kilowatt hour battery and you've got a 50 kilowatt hour battery inside your EV, and you've got solar booming. Well, if power goes out, how do you use that 10 kilowatt hours? Well, you can run all your entire home and then suck it down in an hour or two because you're using like crazy amounts of energy, or you can, in a smart way, curtail loads dynamically with a smart panel. And you can say, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. In fact, it all can happen autonomously because you have some basic presets
that
allow
what
you
I
to
was
say,
going to say, is that it's smart enough now. When you start talking about smart homes, they're getting smarter, and it's able to identify circuits that are maybe using too much. It's able to track history. It keeps a history now of
what it'll learn from you
typical
eventually.
circuits do during your normal operations, and it'll identify outliers and say, hey, you know what, this circuit's using way too much. I mean, maybe you have an air conditioning in a guest room and somebody left it on and nobody's noticed, or maybe you actually do have guests and they're using it. I mean, but it'll let you know, you might want to take a look at that.
It's kind of like
I heard somebody say recently they had a large appliance fail, like a dryer or something, and because it was drawing too much current, even before the failure, they were able to identify that, hey, this thing is operating abnormally.
That's so cool.
And take a look at it. Yeah, so you can get a repair out before it actually breaks down.
That's a whole additional value proposition here. The bottom line is, it's almost like like you take the old dad of the 70s that said, who turned up the thermostat, right? Or who, right? That guy. Now it's a smart panel, and it's much friendlier, and it's less judgmental, and it doesn't yell at you, but it says, hey, these are the things that are happening in your home right now on a load by load or device by device basis. And you can make changes. And that world is evolving at the moment too. I talked to Troy the other day, maybe less than a month ago, and he's like, there's some things happening I can't even tell you because there's some things happening in the way we handle this tech, and it's really different and it's really exciting. Bottom line is that you've got, but if you were just looking at this going, why on earth would I need a smart panel? Here's a very simple reason. Power goes out, right? Instead of having 2 hours of backup power because you're just using all of your energy, you might have 2 days. It can make those kinds of decisions for you. And remember the Pantech design minutes we did, Jay? Let's say that you curtailed loads because you want to keep that battery powering your home over this undefined period of a power outage. When we think about emergency situations, and but then you need to use something like your garage door. Yeah. So what do? You go into your app and you say garage door breaker on. And then you use your garage door and you turn it off, garage door breaker off. And then, so you're able to use what you need at a given moment and preserve the longevity of your batteries, which are kind of the new kit. And the next stage of that is bidirectional charging, because then we go from a 10 kilowatt hour battery or a 20 kilowatt hour battery that we have on our side of our homes to now, there's a 50 kilowatt or 100 kilowatt hour, lightning sitting in our driveway. How do we take advantage of that? And there are some companies that are producing technology that I know we're going to segue to, right? That allow you to do that. Now, I'm not talking about Osiaco. That's another company up in Montreal that we had on the show. Remember bidirectional charging? We also, but the one that's at this show right now is, remember the Wallbox? We had them on the show, I think 2 years ago. And the Wallbox, what is it, the Quasar 2? Let me pull it up here for a second. I don't know if you've got the bottom line, and I saw 11.6 kilowatts. I remember
bidirectional is a huge issue for a lot of people. I've had people literally come to me and said, "Yeah, I'll buy an EV, but only when I can use it as the home battery in an emergency situation as well." And so it's a major selling point for people as you see these EVs come online. People want this particular feature more than any other, and I think it's because of the sheer number of extreme weather events we've had recently.
But you don't want to. In the absence of that, you're sitting there and you have this huge asset, and you can't use it, right? So it's like because if you're a guy's buying an EV,
why would you pay for it when you can't use it?
Well, if you're a guy that's buying an EV, and you're probably a guy that's already looking at solar and solar plus batteries, right? Sure. So you're in that kind of world, and then and if you were to try to put that amount of batteries on your roof, you'd be tanked. It'd be 100 G's, right?
Yeah.
So, you got your EV. It could even be a leased EV. Who knows, right? And so you've got this EV. It's got all this power. Why can't I use it? Why can't I use it in this environment? And this is what really
The
rounds
landscape is
out the
changing
technology.
too. The landscape is changing too for both charging and discharging. California they have proposals on the table to cut the credit you get for feeding back to the grid by another 75% and levy a tax on people with residential solar. I mean, it's going to be it's really aggressive by the utilities. So you're going to want control of your energy. So these smart panels, these smart chargers, bi-directional, being able to move your own energy in your own sphere of influence is going to become really important. It's the only power we have.
Okay, so this space is an area that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I like it, and I'm really enthusiastic about the potential. And what occurs to me is that if you have a solar plus battery system and you have a bi-directional EV charger, of course, there's an emergency and an outage scenario value proposition. But in general, the opportunity to be able to put energy somewhere when the grid doesn't want it, or when you power hungry utilities, I'm not really interested in kind of boxing my words at all. Those guys are saying, hey, we're going to try to tax you. We're going to try to hit you. We're going to try to change rates on you. I mean, that energy arbitrage that they're playing in order to maintain their position of power, right? You now can say, I'll just throw it into my EV. And imagine if you have two EVs. Somebody's driving, somebody's not. Most people have two cars, right? Most people do. So, in the United States, imagine you have two EVs. Someone's driving. One is there that's saying, I can suck up, 60, 70, 80 kilowatt hours of juice at any given moment, right? You have power at that moment. Power, I mean, in terms of individualized power to be able to make decisions. You also have power.
You have authority. You have authority,
sure. So you could say, hey, at a given moment, I'm not going to feed that back to the grid. This thing, my levelized cost of energy, if I know that levelized cost of energy is a metric within the solar plus battery or solar world, my levelized cost of energy is X amount. And if I've created this energy and the utility doesn't want to pay me for it, or they don't want to pay me a rate that I believe is reflective of my investment, or is not the best rate for me, then I can either use it, store it in my battery on my roof, the aforementioned, which could be very expensive if you had too much batteries, or boom, this big reservoir of electron storage right in your driveway. And you can, you have that flexibility.
Think of it as a bucket. Where do I put it? Put it in the bucket.
It's beautiful. And especially when we're going to talk eventually about generators. I think the generator really rounds out the entire equation. But that's where you're
bulletproof, anything can happen and I'm okay kind of scenario.
Yeah, because you can always run it and run it fast and run it hard and you got what you need. So okay, so the Quasar 2, this is V to H, right? Of course, people are going to bring up the concept of V to G. It's a little more complex, because now you've got the idea of taking vehicle energy and dissipating it or distributing it to the grid. There are companies that are looking at that stuff, but that's probably farther on down the road. V to H is pretty straightforward, and right there with us, Wallbox is doing it, and these technologies are there. Now, I just saw the stats again. I remember reading it earlier, but I think it was 11.5 kilowatts of power. 11.5 is that's a lot. I think that's one of them. It's a level 2 charger, isn't it? At 40 amps, but bi-directional. Yeah, because we were excited about the 11s before.
It's not a super fast in one direction, get 100 miles in 10 minutes type of battery for your car. It is truly taking that much power, and you could do whole home kind of backup on that.
That's whole home backup for sure. That's 40 amps. Right. Yeah. And that is, if I remember correctly, the Solar Edge Energy Hub system and their EV charger, which was not bi-directional at the time. I'm sure they're moving in that direction too, but that was something like 11 and change when you took the solar plus the grid and aggregated it. And it was the most powerful level 2 charger on the planet at the time. That was about a year or so ago. So now the Quasar 2 and the and Wallbox out of Spain, I believe, they're now doing that bi-directionally. This is how fast the industry moves, man. It just evolves, right? Bi-directional.
We can do 11.5. We can do 11.5 both ways.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
exactly, dude. That is so power boost. And they got a bunch of other stuff too. Wallbox is a great company to take a look at. They're doing commercial EV charging as well. They have something called the Supernova, the DC fast charger. That's 65 to 130 kilowatts of power. That's some serious juice. That's the kind of stuff that might happen on a highway for like a Tesla super, what do you call them? Superchargers? Is that what they call them?
That's like I said, 100 miles in 10 minutes if you're sitting there and just really.
So they have those. That's not a
that is not bi-directional. That is just to charge the vehicle when you have an abundance of power.
Yeah, well, it'd be a little spooky bidirectionally. Hypernova, right? Hypernova is 350 kilowatts of power. So now you're getting ready for like the trucks, right, moving across the country and recharging something with maybe, who knows, maybe there's a megawatt hour of storage in a bus I know we just did a show on BYD's batteries, and of course they're city commuting things. They're a few hundred kilowatt hours, a couple hundred kilowatt hours, but they're bigger than EVs. And then when you get into something like the trucks, who's doing the truck? The Tesla Semi. I don't remember the stats on the kilowatt hours, but that's the type of charging that you probably would need to be able to make substantial difference in a short period of time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Hypernova, very cool stuff. Anyway, check out Wallbox. They got loads of cool stuff. There's like 3 or 4 other technologies there too. Which one do you want to take a look at next, bro?
Do you want to talk about Plug Power at all?
I can't talk about their fuel cell because I haven't read it and I can only find one article.
Okay.
But I know that Plug.
We'll shelve that. I mean, that's the other edge of the coin. We're talking about all these EVs and they have batteries, and what do you do with that storage? But we need to talk about storage itself. I mean, storage itself is kind of the big thing. You know what? There's one thing I want to talk about, and this kind of the dovetails in domestic manufacturing, domestic from the perspective of the United States. Just about every presentation that I have seen has been referencing this. Bringing new fabs online, bringing new microprocessor facilities online, being able to source and build panels, whether they're solar panels or body panels for the vehicles, whatever it is, locally. So much of this stuff is regionally, at the very least. It really seems like a major talking point for just about everybody out there. Have you been seeing the same thing, or am I hallucinating?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the supply chain, well, we're hurting right now, right? Yeah. We're hurting. Yeah. And so that's a topic that's going to come up, and they're going to be talking about how they can solve those issues. And, the bottom line is that, we, for the last couple decades, have made we, meaning America, United States of America, have made a decision to outsource certain technologies, many technologies, and it's going to take time to develop the what they call them, sil fabs, that they're called, or the ability to create these things, whether they're for computers, whether they're for EVs, or whether it's going to take time, and it's going to take investment, and that's.
Do you really think that it's going to come to fruition? Because we're on the fast side. Nobody wants another shutdown. I don't think we're going to see that type of stuff again. Do you really? Do I
think that we're going to reinstitute manufacturing in the United States? I think I have an answer to that. I do. Yeah. And here's the reason why. Look at these shipping costs that we have right now. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you think about how expensive it is, I was just looking at I was in the sourcing business back in 2006. Right. And I remember sourcing textiles, not electronics, textiles in China. And then it made sense because you would take basically the cost of making something in the United States, the cost of making it in China, you'd add on the shipping cost, you'd bring it in, and you would see a delta, and you would be in your favor. And then that's where the textile industry went. And that actually decimated New England, right? Because there was a textile haven, right? That was where a lot of textile was done. So of course that had negative impacts on the labor force, but it had positive impacts on having inexpensive things, right? If you could say that. No, but the problem with technology, they're part of the same conversation, but obviously there's a national security issue here, right? We can't rely on our competitor / nemesis for the manufacturing we need. It just doesn't. We need to be able to and right now we've got that math is different. it's so expensive to ship things. And I know guys innovating in the shipping space. I know guys that are innovating in logistics and software and things to try to reduce the expenses. But the bottom line is the expense of shipping is huge. And we've got, kind of to a certain degree, bad actor partners. We really need to have some industries that are stable here in the United States for sure. And I think the math can support that. And I also think that the robotics and the type of automation that happens in the factories lends itself to that as well. It's not going to be like the same level of, I mean, of course, this is all specifics, right? If you're talking about, making PV cells, which is something we're somewhat familiar with, that's not like it's going to be thousands of employees in a fab. You're going to have a lot of robotics. You're going to have certain amounts of employees to do certain tasks that are better handled by people, right? Yeah. And that's going to be beneficial for us. And I think we're going to see that across the supply chain. I think we're going to see favorable policy for, I hope we will see favorable policy. What the hell do I know about what DC is actually going to do? But I hope we see favorable policy. And they're already working on that with tax credits right now, for example.
Be there talking about it because
yeah. Well, look at the tax credits look at the tax credits for EVs at the moment, right? Sure. So now you can get up to, I think it was like, and I don't know if this is fully passed or not yet. I should know that with the Build Back Better and with the different infrastructure bills that were there, but you're looking at up to $12,500 per car. And the last couple pieces of that beyond the current level is, union labor, American domestic manufacturing, it layers on, right, these incentives. So that's policy that's trying to be put into place in order to recreate a manufacturing base to take advantage of this new momentum in the electrification of transpo. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm excited about that. I'll tell you what, one we can talk about, I think is kind of related to this. It's supply chain E, right? Mm-hmm. But is the Blue Eddy. The Blue Eddy.
Sure.
Now, this is a fun tech, Jay. Now, this is not EV. We're going to go into batteries, and we're going to go into batteries in a way that are not so much like your standard home battery, like a Tesla or a Generac or an LG Chem 10H or a Sonin or a Panasonic Evervolt, or who am I missing? Not those guys. But I recently had a good buddy of mine that now lives out in Hana in a beautiful little Hale, right? Like kind of in the middle of Kipahulu, actually. Kipahulu is kind of the far side of Hana, right? And he was asking me about these particular things. These are batteries that can be charged, kind of agnostically, whether it's from generator or from grid or from solar or from wind. And they're these little portable chargers. And this thing called the Blue Eddy comes up in many of, when you're doing those searches. Blue Eddy, I believe they had some lithium iron phosphates. They probably had some lithium cobalts. And that was pretty much what was going on. And for CES this year, Blue Eddy came out with a sodium ion battery bank, which is, by the way, I'd never seen before. Why would they go about doing that? Well, the basic concept is that sodium, there's more of it than there is of lithium around, and it's easier to get access to. That's what I understand. Am I right on that, Jay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the lithium has always been a big kind of sticking point when you're talking about these batteries, the lithium ion, lithium, whatever. It's expensive. It's difficult to mine. Lithium cobalt, especially because cobalt starts bringing in a lot of geopolitical issues. So there's
meaning that we get our cobalt from war-torn countries where they don't have good labor practices. So you could have like a kid harvesting cobalt out of the ground.
They're literally out there with scrapers and picks, just trying to,
which is pretty terrible for the developed world to take advantage of that kind of thing. So sodium, does that provide a solution to that? Right. And that's, everyone's kind of looking at other storage alternatives, but I don't see a lot of right to market new chemistries coming out. This is pretty rare.
I don't think it is a new chemistry. It's not, it's just not, it hasn't been commercialized because it was immediately identified as not as energy dense as the lithium technologies that are competing against it. And that's what everybody keeps talking about. Our goal has been energy density. We need more power in a smaller space, more energy in a smaller space to do more work. To move a vehicle. I mean, vehicle is a heavy thing. It takes a lot of power. It's the reason why those batteries are 3 times your home battery. Your home doesn't move generally. So
right, but in this case,
you need a lot of energy. But these types of things can be useful in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and then in a situation that's useful is my buddy Willie that's living in this cool little holly out in Kipahulu. And I just sold him some extra solar panels that I had. You probably remember some of these solar panels sitting around. I was like, hey man, I think this will work. And he's got them set up, and he's got a very no, he didn't break it, Jay. Unlike some people we know. Not those ones. Not the bifacials. We have a picture of Jay, holding a bifacial that's cracked. So I'm going to read some of the specs on this because we just went through the process. I sat down with Willie while he was trying to figure out how to power his devices out in this little hale in Kipahulu in Maui, right? And he's got about 6 of the panels set up right now. He's not using this particular battery bank. He used something much more conventional. But this sodium ion power station comes with 4 20 amp traditional wall plugs, 4 20 amps, right? As well as a 30 amp L1430 output port. I don't know exactly what that means, but you got about 3,000 watt pure sine wave inverter in here. And apparently sodium ion has good thermal characteristics and good longevity characteristics. So, but I will tell you that these systems tend to be a few $1,000s. You tend to be able to hook up, maybe 6 or 7 or so panels. That we just went through this process looking at all of these little, portable battery for your little cabin kind of systems. And so if this is something that can get outside of the lithium cobalt thermal problems, and if it can do something similar to lithium iron phosphate, maybe at a better cost, that would be interesting. If we can see some cost savings.
Cost is a thing because lithium is expensive and everybody wants it right now because they're all making batteries with it. So to be able to use it, I'm most interested in the technology at large. Like if it gets more R&D money because people are buying these types of products, you can, when space is not a concern. So the reason why we go for those super high energy dense lithium technology batteries is because it needs to be in our phone, and we need it to stay as long as possible, and run as long as possible.
Is that your kerosene delivery? Jay lives in Osaka, and he's still out there. It's still common in the winter months to get deliveries of kerosene. I was hoping that. I remember that happened once before. So.
Yeah, I actually need to go downstairs for just a second.
Welcome to the Solar Coaster, a renewable energy themed talk show right here in lovely Maui County.
Actually cheaper to build new solar technology than it is to operate existing fossil fuel.